Welcome back to episode 2 of SM Sports Radio. I'm Micah Farmer,
And I'm Samuel Goodrow.
and it was another great week of college basketball. Super entertaining. I know I was super excited to watch it all and really enjoyed it. How about you, Samuel?
Yeah, so obviously a very exciting week of college basketball. The calendar is flipped over to March, which is my favorite month of the year, just with all the semantics we get in college basketball. Just a great time of year. And some of those fireworks actually started this week, a lot of exciting games.
For sure. I know we've both talked about Kentucky last week as a really exciting team, fun to watch, and they did not disappoint this week, putting up a ton of points once again.
Yeah, that's the kind of team that you could see either losing in the round of 64 just due to a bunch of defensive meltdowns, or even, as we've kind of mentioned, maybe even taking it all the way to the Final Four. But a couple of big wins for Kentucky this week, not necessarily against the strongest competition, with wins over Mississippi State and Arkansas, respectively, at Mississippi State and home against Arkansas. 91-89 in that Mississippi State game, a game that Mississippi State actually controlled for much of the game. Josh Hubbard led the way there for Mississippi State with 34 points, but how about Reed Shepherd putting up 32 points, 7 assists, and 5 rebounds, including a nice floater for the game winner over there in Starkville.
Yeah, that would have been a great win for Mississippi State, a team that has a pretty good resume this year, and that place would have gone absolutely crazy if they were able to pull that off. But unfortunately, like you said, Reed Shepherd putting the nail in their coffin, and then Kentucky almost upset again. Arkansas controlled a lot of that game in Rupp Arena, had a great lead at one point, but then towards the end they just started to fall apart, which has kind of been a theme for the Razorbacks this season. And Kentucky's offense just took over, pushing them to a 111-102 win.
Yeah, Arkansas is one of those teams that all the talent is there. They have a good coach, and it's just kind of confusing why they've been sitting around 500 for much of the season. But you're right, in that game, not a lot of defense, but Kentucky's shown that they can win without playing much defense. A super balanced attack there against Arkansas. Antonio Reeves did lead the way with 22 points for the Wildcats, but 7 double-digit scorers, just a very unique aspect of depth that the Wildcats can boast this season. 6th time this season scoring at least 100 points. So incredible performance by Kentucky, avoiding a pretty disastrous loss at home in Rupp Arena.
Yeah, good week for the Wildcats. Also a good week for the Tennessee Volunteers, who defended their home court against Auburn on Wednesday, a game that I actually got to see in person. And I have to say, the Tennessee basketball arena is the craziest basketball environment I've ever witnessed. It was even louder than some football games I've been to, which I didn't believe was possible, but Vol Nation was rocking out there, and Dalton Connect absolutely went off, putting up 39 in that one, and he was completely unstoppable.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to get some of your thoughts. What's it like to see a player of his caliber in person? I'd say Connect is probably second best player in the country right now, pretty easily. Gotta go with Zach Edey as National Player of the Year, just with the numbers that he's putting up. But to see Dalton Connect in person, man, what was that like?
Well, obviously, I'm an Auburn student. I'm going to be pulling for Auburn, but in that environment, it was just hard not to get caught up in the energy and the passion that those Tennessee fans have for Dalton Connect, and just be in awe of how good he is at basketball. They would kick it out to him so quickly. He would run around, and I would think, there's no way that's a makeable shot. He would just jump sideways into the air, fire off a three, and it would swish every time. Then Auburn would start to press him up to the three-point line. He could just drive by and dunk it. There was absolutely nothing the Auburn defense could do to stop him. And that's a defense that's been one of the best in the nation this season. So to see Connect just consistently be able to pick it apart like that was truly impressive to watch. And Dalton Connect definitely has my vote for SEC Player of the Year at this point.
Yeah, and Connect, one of those players that you can kind of count on to probably take over some games in March, both in the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. But Tennessee showing that they can win without him putting up video game numbers. He had just 13 points in Tennessee's 81-74 win at Alabama. Zakai Ziegler actually led the way there with 18. In an off night for Connect, the Volunteers still able to pull out the victory. So that begs the question in my mind, could we see this Tennessee team go all the way to the Final Four? What are your thoughts?
Well, they're one of my Final Four teams at the start of the year, so for the sake of my bracket, I sure hope so. But in all seriousness, I definitely think this Tennessee team is built for a deep run, especially if Ziegler is making shots out on the perimeter consistently. Joseph Adu down low has also been very good for the Volunteers. And then Vescovi defensively, I think, is a very fun player to watch for Tennessee as well. Played great defense in that Alabama game, and I think was a very underrated part of why they were successful with coming out on top in Tuscaloosa. So I think this is a very complete Tennessee team, and I would not be surprised at all to see them in the Final Four.
Yeah, definitely a team that could make it all the way off the hand of Dalton Connect, but also a lot of other stars around him. Another SEC team that had a pretty good week was South Carolina with victories over in College Station at Texas A&M and then home in a thriller against Florida on Saturday, 82-76. Michi Johnson with a great performance in both of those games, 22 at A&M and 25 versus Florida. And that Florida game, I really thought the Gators controlled for much of the game. I'd say about 30 minutes, but really belonged to the Gators. But then, man, once Lamont Paris shifted to that 1-3-1 zone out of man, I thought the game totally flipped on its head.
Yeah, for sure. I think Todd Golden can kind of go into a bit of analysis paralysis sometimes with his offensive scheming. He's a very good analytically minded coach and has been amazing out of timeouts all year, especially. But as soon as Paris pulled out that zone, the Gators looked lost out there, could not attack it at all. And I think that lack of adaptation could definitely hurt Florida as they go into the SEC and NCAA tournaments this year. But I think this Gators team has such a high ceiling with their scoring they get from their guards. Micah Logton has developed a lot as the year has moved on. So I think this is a little bit of a bump in the road for Florida for sure. I think Todd Golden will be able to figure this stuff out. If there's one coach I know that's going to be diving into the analytics and figuring out why their offense couldn't get going, it is Todd Golden. So I think they'll be able to bounce back, but definitely credit to Lamont Paris for making that adjustment and credit to South Carolina for a good week.
Yeah, Lamont Paris has got to be my front runner, at least at this point, for Coach of the Year. And I thought it was more of a statement win for South Carolina than it was a real letdown for Florida. But unfortunately, the metrics aren't really agreeing. Florida not really dropping much in the net rankings, but South Carolina staying the same there in the 40s somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where they're rated in the net. But I think they are a little bit underrated in that aspect, and I think they're going to outperform whatever seed line that they end up being on in the NCAA tournament and could maybe even make a run into the second weekend and beyond.
For sure. The net hasn't loved them all year, but they keep winning anyway, so we'll see what happens. Over to the Big East, Villanova with an important win over Providence, 71-60. Justin Moore with a good game in this one. What did you think about that?
Yeah, so Justin Moore really put Villanova on his back there in the second half and a really tough place to play in the AMP over there at Providence. Just Providence's sixth loss at home in their last 56 home games, so a really impressive win for Justin Moore and Villanova. Devin Carter for Providence had a pretty good game, but it's pretty obvious that he's banged up, hasn't been the same, and injuries have really riddled Providence here down the stretch. That was a really pivotal game between two bubble teams there in the Big East. Villanova finds themselves on the right side of the bubble now with that big victory, but Providence still now on the outside looking in just a little bit and going to have to finish strong there in the Big East.
For sure. I think the Big East has a chance to be one of the more entertaining conference tournaments this season up there in Madison Square Garden, so I bet you're super excited for that. I know I am. Then over to the Big 12 out in Middle America, Baylor with two big wins this week over TCU and then a statement win over Kansas at home.
Yeah, so Baylor rebounding after a couple of tough losses last week, winning on the road at TCU 62-54. Yvonne Missy and Jacoby Walter with 16 each in that game. A nice win over a really scrappy TCU team. That was a very slow-paced, ugly game, a lot of turnovers, a lot of missed shots. But that's the kind of game that you like to see Baylor win because usually they like to play in those games that turn into track meets. So it's interesting to see them able to succeed in kind of a slugfest there against TCU. And then on the flip side, defending home court against Kansas, a really balanced attack scoring-wise between Dennis, Nunn, and Misi, 19, 18, and 17 points respectively in that game. And honestly, this loss for Kansas raises a lot of red flags for me, not just because of this one result in particular. Just I've watched a lot of Kansas basketball this season. I'm really worried that they might not even make it out of the first weekend, which is really almost crazy to even think about that a Bill Self-coached team could find themselves on upset alert in the first or second round. But I just really have no trust in this team. Kevin McCullough's banged up. His knee has caused him to miss 5 of the last 7 games. Played through that injury in this Baylor game, but definitely wasn't the same. And if Kansas is going to make a big run, we're going to need to see the Hunter Dickinson of old like we saw at Michigan in his time over there.
Definitely, and I think obviously this week for Baylor, like you said, that whenever TCU being able to slow it down like they did, I think that's something that gives me a lot more confidence in Baylor come tournament time, that they're able to adapt to these different play styles and really grind out a win any way they need to. Over to the Big Ten, where Illinois took down Wisconsin 91-83 in Madison, in a great win for the Illini, and Marcus Domask with 31 in this one, a great game from him.
Yeah, and Terrence Shannon with 23 points and 5 rebounds. Shannon's really been the most consistent scoring option for the Illini, but great if you're an Illini fan to see Marcus Domask step up and score in the efficient way that he did. Domask and Shannon are going to have to each put up these kind of numbers if Illinois is going to go far in the NCAA tournament, just because this is a team that does not have much depth, and we've seen games that they've gotten in foul trouble, like games at Penn State and a few others along the road in the Big Ten, that has really caused some problems for this Illinois team. And honestly, I'm even more concerned than I am about Kansas, about Wisconsin. They started the year super hot, built a pretty nice resume, and they just continue to slide. This is at least their 4th loss in the past 8 games, maybe their 5th, and certainly not a team that I will be predicting to go very far in the NCAA tournament, as they were initially projected around a 2 seed when bracketology first started to ramp up, but now all the way down to a 5, 6, 7 seed right now, somewhere in there, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a team that peaked too early into the season and is kind of just in free fall right now. So for the Badgers' sake, we'll hope they can get that righted, maybe make some noise in the Big Ten tournament to save their seed line a little bit heading into the big dance later this month. Then Creighton with a big win over Marquette, as John Rothstein would say, somewhere in Middle America out in Omaha.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where in Middle America Omaha is, not sure 95% of Americans know where Omaha is.
Is it even a real place?
That's the debate here on SM Sports Radio episode 2. But Creighton with a really impressive win against Marquette. Marquette though with no Oso Ighodaro or Tyler Kolek. Ighodaro out with illness in this game on Saturday, and Tyler Kolek dealing with a little bit of an injury. Creighton really shot the ball well in this game. 13 made threes. Baylor Shireman put up a crazy stat line, 29 points and 16 rebounds from that forward position. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner with 19 points and 6 rebounds there at center. And Trey Alexander, 18 points and 11 assists there as their point guard. And this is a team that I think is getting hot at the right time, kind of on the flip side of Wisconsin and Kansas. This is a team that, if they shoot at the level that they have been shooting, this is a team that could very easily find themselves in the Final Four.
For sure. You and I were actually watching this game together, and that entire first half, we just were shocked over and over again because it felt like the Blue Jays could not miss from beyond the arc in that one, and ended up getting a good win over a very highly rated Marquette team.
Yeah, and it's not like these shots were just wide open all the time. They were coming off of screens, fading away, kind of like what you mentioned Dalton Connect was able to do against Auburn. It almost seemed like Creighton's entire team was able to do this on Saturday against Marquette.
Yeah, incredibly impressive performance for them. Then Purdue over Michigan State. The Zach Edey show rolls right along all the way into March.
Yeah, Zach Edey definitely going to be the 2-time National Player of the Year. His height is just a crazy matchup problem for whatever team that Purdue matches up with. Obviously, a win over Tom Izzo in March is not super easy to come by, as he has an incredible track record and career, not just in the NCAA tournament, but in the Big Ten tournament as well. Braden Smith, a nice compliment to Zach Edey's 32 points with 23 of his own and 9 rebounds, and Purdue clinched a share of their fourth Big Ten title in the last 8 years. And it's Final Four or bust over there for Purdue. They're not satisfied with a Big Ten title, but I'm kind of in the mode of I'll believe it when I see it for Purdue in terms of getting to the Final Four. Too much history of a lot of choking in recent years.
Yeah. Back over to the Big 12, Houston with a good win over Oklahoma in a game that ended up being a lot closer than it looked like it was going to be in the middle of it, with Houston just holding on with a Jamal Shed buzzer beater to win 87-85.
Yeah, I didn't catch too much of this game, but Jamal Shed in the closing seconds of regulation actually missed a mid-range jumper, got his own rebound, and put it back for the win for Houston. Thought Houston would win by a lot more than 2 points. Not a huge believer in this Oklahoma squad. I do like what they're building defensively, but honestly, Oklahoma kind of able to match Houston punch for punch in this game on the offensive end. And LJ Cryer was really the catalyst that put Houston over the top in this one. 23 points and 5 3-pointers.
In our penultimate matchup, we go out west for Gonzaga over St. Mary's, 70-57. A good win for the Zags, a team that we were both doubting a lot going into this game, honestly.
Yeah, this is another team that I think is getting hot at the right time. I watched all 40 minutes of this game on Saturday night. Graham Ike for Gonzaga with 24 points and 10 rebounds. I believe about half of those were on the offensive boards. Ryan Nimhard also with 24 points and 10 assists. And while Gonzaga struggled a lot in the non-conference slate and a little bit over there in West Coast Conference play, I think this was a statement win for Gonzaga going into St. Mary's and handing them their first loss in conference. And Gonzaga is going to be somewhere in the 8 to 10 seed range, maybe a 7. But I'm telling you right now, no team wants to face the Gonzaga Bulldogs right now.
No, for sure. And then finally, we have to give a shout out to college basketball's comeback player of the year, as Kyle Filipowski was able to overcome a brutal injury where his knee almost had to be amputated after a brutal attack during a Wake Forest court storming, and he rebounded to score 21 points in a truly inspiring performance in Duke's win over Virginia.
Micah, thank you for taking the words out of my mouth. Truly an inspiring performance, as you said, for Filipowski. 21 points and 7 rebounds as Duke takes the win against UVA 73-48. Virginia really falling apart here down the stretch. They did win at Boston College this past week, but this loss against Duke, especially by this margin, kind of puts them right back on the bubble. Doesn't help my ACC superiority over the Mountain West argument very much, as I've seen a lot of national pundits over the past couple days kind of pondering the question, will this be a 3-bid ACC, which I truly hope is not the case for the sake of my argument and for the sake of the long-term health of the ACC, which has already been taking a lot of bullets both in football and basketball in recent years.
For sure. That's it for basketball recap this week, but we do have some previews for you as we have a lot of big games coming up this week, especially in the SEC, starting with Alabama at Florida down in Gainesville.
Yeah, so Florida obviously coming off that loss in Columbia at Colonial Life Arena. They're going to be playing in Gainesville against an Alabama squad that also is going to be looking for a bounce-back spot after losing at home to Tennessee. I actually like Florida in this game. Think they're playing better ball of late. I think the Gainesville crowd is going to push them over the top, and I think that Walter Clayton Jr. is going to have a big game. What do you think?
I also like Florida a lot in this game. The duo of Zion Pullen and Walter Clayton Jr. has been money for the Gators, especially at home. They're elite on the offensive glass, top 3 in the country in offensive rebounding. This is another team I got to see in person this year as they blew out Auburn in that building, and I was very impressed by Florida. I think not only do they have the perimeter scoring, but as I said earlier, the development of Micah Hanlogton, who has been instrumental to that offensive rebounding statistic. I think this is a team that can definitely score with and even outscore Alabama, and I also think they have better defense, so especially at home, give me the Gators.
Excellent. And then also in the SEC, a big one on Wednesday night back in Columbia at Colonial Life Arena. Tennessee at the University of South Carolina. Both teams red hot right now. Built a little bit differently. Tennessee has a pretty good defense and is elite scoring the basketball. And I'd say it's kind of the inverse for South Carolina. Pretty good at scoring the basketball, but an elite defense. Super excited for that one. It's going to determine the winner of the SEC in the regular season. And I just think we have a classic on tap there on Wednesday night in Columbia. Yeah, for this SEC matchup on Wednesday, I'm actually going to take the University of South Carolina. Give me Lamont Paris and the Fighting Quarter Zips. I've been doubting this team all year, just thinking that a collapse was impending. No way they can beat Kentucky at home. No way they can beat Florida at home. And I've been on the wrong side of those predictions every single time. So I'm gonna see if I can try my luck on South Carolina's side, which pains me to do as a Clemson student. But I do think
He's just going for the jinx. That's all it is.
I do think the Fighting Quarter Zips find a way on Wednesday in Colonial Life Arena. Give me the Cox.
Yeah, should be a great game. I personally am going to take Tennessee to win this one. I just think Dalton Connect is going to be too much, and even if he's not, I think Zakai Ziegler with that perimeter shooting is going to be great. I'll be curious to see if Santiago Vescovi can slow down Michi Johnson in this game. That should be a fun matchup to watch. I would not be surprised if Tennessee stuck Vescovi right on him the entire game, but I do think Tennessee comes out with a win out of Colonial Life. Then over in the Big East, we got the rematch of UConn Marquette, this time at Marquette, last time up in Connecticut. UConn kind of slapped Marquette around, so do you think Marquette is going to rebound from that, or do you think it'll be more of the same?
I think this all depends on if Marquette can get Tyler Kolek back from his lingering injury that forced him to miss time there against Creighton. Obviously, Marquette hopes to have him back. I think this is a Marquette squad full of dogs. They really held it pretty close with Creighton for much of that game, down their best two players. Oso Igudaro will definitely be back for this game, healing from his illness that he suffered that forced him to miss the Creighton game. If Tyler Kolek plays in this one, though, give me Marquette.
I completely agree. I think Shaka Smart is going to have Marquette ready for this game, and Marquette at home, if they get Kolek back, I think they definitely want to make a statement in this after how the first game against the Huskies went. So Marquette for sure if Kolek is back. If he's not, I would give the edge to the Huskies, though.
Definitely. And UConn looking to break that streak of being winless against ranked teams on the road since 2014. That should be a classic on Saturday. Another game to preview this weekend, Memphis at FAU. These teams coming out of the American playing their best ball in conference play down the stretch. Memphis struggling for much of conference play, but actually on Sunday afternoon we're down 20 points at halftime to UAB and actually rebounded to win by 15. I got to watch that one on Sunday afternoon, and just a crazy swing for Penny Hardaway's squad. And then for FAU, we kind of know what they can do, and even the casual basketball fan that just watches March Madness knows what they can do scoring the basketball between John L. Davis, Abijah Martin, and Vlad Golden. That'll be a super fun game to watch, and I'm actually going to take Memphis in this one. I think they're playing just a little bit better than FAU. FAU surviving a lot of close games. And I think the sense of urgency is really going to be there for Memphis as they find themselves on the wrong side of the bubble for an at-large spot as we kind of inch closer towards what's going to be an amazing American Athletic Conference tournament.
Well, at the risk of looking like a moron come later this week, I'm finally going to switch up our picks a little bit. I'm taking FAU in this one. While I do agree with the desperation of Memphis, I think what you're talking about with FAU, these games are struggling to get by. They know they need a statement win at this point to really round out the regular season on a high. I think this game would be an excellent opportunity to do that, so I think FAU takes advantage and wins in this one. Our last game upcoming this week is Kansas at Houston in a good old-fashioned Big 12 showdown in a game that, honestly, I don't think Kansas has much of a chance in, although knowing the season, that means they win by 30. But the way Kansas has been playing lately, I don't really trust them, especially not at Houston. This Houston team is just completely suffocating, especially at home, so give me Houston in this one.
Yeah, I think this is a very bad combination of events for Kansas. Number one, Kevin McCullough, obviously not healthy, knee very banged up. Number two, Kansas away from home this season, especially in Big 12 play, has just been atrocious. And number three, Houston's just the best team in the country right now. Play stifling defense. They're scoring the basketball at an elite clip right now. I honestly don't see a way that Kansas even loses by single digits. Give me Houston by 15 in this one.
Wow.
The NFL Combine occurred this weekend, and resident NFL draft analysis expert Micah Farmer is here to break down all the measurable performances, both offensively and defensively. So, NFL draft gurus, NFL fans in general, you're going to need to pay close attention to this one and see who your team might want to draft. First off, Texas wide receiver Xavier Worthy breaking the 40-yard dash record with a blazing 4.21.
Yeah, he was absolutely flying out there. And first off, I want to say if we talked about every player that I wanted to get into on this episode, it would be 37 hours long and none of you would watch it. So we're just going to hit the highlights, starting with Xavier Worthy. That 4.2140 is obviously the most outstanding part of that. But then you look at his weight. He ran it at only 165, which shockingly isn't even too far below his play weight at Texas, which is in the low 170s. I think if you're wanting an elite deep threat that's going to get down the field, this is your guy. He has good hands, excellent deep ball tracking, showed that at Texas, and his concern is going to be durability. It's the same concerns we had with a guy like Devontae Smith, only Worthy is even lighter. So we'll have to see if he can stand up to NFL hits, but I definitely would take a shot on him either at the very back end of the first or early in the second.
Yeah, and Patrick Mahomes actually took notice to this feat. I think his eyes got a little bit big as he had flashbacks to Tyreek Hill's playing days in Kansas City. He took to Twitter just kind of with those eyes emoji talking about Xavier Worthy. Do you think that'd be a good fit for the Chiefs?
I like that fit, honestly, although there is one more receiver we'll get to in just a minute who I think fits the Chiefs even better.
Yeah, and talk to us about this RAS score that we're going to be talking about a little bit throughout the remainder of the prospect analysis.
Yes, so this RAS score, RAS score, as you might also hear it called, is just a measurement of a player's athletic profile. This does nothing to project how good they are on a football field, doesn't project their mechanics. It's just how good of an athlete are you at your height and weight. It's done by Kentley Platt at MathBomb on Twitter, so credit to him. I always love looking at these every year, and Xavier Worthy's for this year was a 9.37, which essentially means it goes up to 10. 0 is you're the worst at your player since it's been started being tracked, and a 10 is you're the highest level of athlete that has been measured since they started tracking this. So a 9.37 is pretty dang good.
So for our football nerd listeners and watchers that are tuning in, I think this statistic is for you. We had another wide receiver that put on a pretty good performance at the Combine as well, and that would be wide receiver Ricky Pearsall out of Florida.
Yes. If you watch any Florida football, you know this is a guy that was instrumental in the Gators offense, made some great leaping catches, and I know a lot of Florida fans always watching Ricky Pearsall out there going, man, he gets up for these deep balls. He gets up for these contested catches. Well, he only went up and put up a 42-inch vert, which is third out of all receivers, so safe to say he can jump pretty high. Then also put up a 4.4140, which was faster than I was expecting. And when you see a player like that, who their 40 is faster than their play speed, it's usually going to mean one of two things. Either they aren't comfortable getting up to their full speed in a game and they don't really know how to move well with pads, or their offense is designed to where a lot of times they're not utilizing this full play speed, which I think is more likely in the Florida offense with how run heavy it was, how check down heavy it was. So I think Pearsall might have put himself in the second round with this, and I definitely think any team that just needs a kind of get open guy would be very happy to have Ricky.
Definitely a guy who made himself some money with his performance at the Combine. Moving on to Louisville running back Isaac Garendo, and for those of you that are now learning the relative athletic score with myself, obviously Micah over here, very well versed in RAS scores, but Isaac Garendo puts up a 999 RAS score.
Yeah, so that's nearly perfect, basically. Garindo is 6 foot 221, then ran out a 4.33 40, which was first among running backs. Put up a 41.5 inch vert, first among running backs, and then a 10 foot 9 inch broad jump, which was second among running backs. This dude is a freakish athlete. The tape for him, I'll admit, isn't great. He can struggle to find holes sometimes. You watch him at Louisville, you wonder, is this really, like, surely you can play better than this. You're this high level of an athlete, and for some reason it just seems to not quite have fully clicked yet. Although I think this is a guy that you can get great value on down the board if you can develop him properly. This is a guy who has the athletic ceiling to be a top 10 running back in the league.
Certainly, and we know all about one LSU wide receiver in Malik Neighbors, definitely going to find himself in the first round, but his teammate put on a show at the Combine as well. Brian Thomas Jr. showing off the wheels in Indianapolis.
Yes, this is a guy who I think, if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, is a match made in heaven. Thomas is massive. He's 6'3", 209, and he has blazing speed. Ran a 4.33 40, second to only Xavier Worthy, and that speed shows up on tape. He was torching people consistently at LSU. You want to know how Malik Neighbors had such a good season? Part of it was because Brian Thomas Jr. kept stretching the field, making defenses rotate back to cover that, and they can't fully cover Neighbors anymore because of Thomas's deep speed. I think him in the Kansas City offense would be scary, especially to myself as a Chargers fan. I really don't want that to happen, but I think it's an elite team fit, and his RAS score was a 9.97, so when you have a guy who's that good of a raw athlete and the tape is that good, I find it hard to see a world in which Thomas is a miss in this draft, and I think this combine performance might have even pushed him into the top 20.
Pretty crazy that this guy was the Heisman winner, Jaden Daniels' wide receiver too. Another wide receiver who had a really good day we actually got to see in the college football playoff, and that was Texas wide receiver A.D. Mitchell.
Yeah, this guy is another freak, another 9.97 RAS. These guys just keep churning it out. This receiver class is freakishly athletic. Mitchell is 6'2", 205, has massive hands built like vices. If the ball gets in his hands, it's not touching the ground. He has some of the best hands in college football. Ran a 4.34 40, just 1/100th of a second behind Thomas. So that deep speed is still there. And when you watch his play speed, that's not something you necessarily expect. Although I think it's partly because of how big he is. Because of how long his strides are, he doesn't necessarily look as fast on tape. But then when you watch it compared to the DBs that are covering him, he can instantly stack a corner, just fly by and be open down the field. And then his comeback routes are also lethal because of this. He can just put on the brakes, slam down, a corner will go flying 10 yards by, and it's an easy catch for him. So if you're a team at the top of the second round, I would keep my eye on A.D. Mitchell for sure.
Mitchell certainly looking like a can't-miss prospect. Another guy that had a performance that probably improved his draft stock quite a bit was Georgia wide receiver Ladd McConkey, who has more than sneaky speed.
Yeah, you hear that a lot with these little white boy receivers running around out there. McConkey, 5'11", 186, then ran a 4.39 40, 7th in this year's class. And his 10-yard split was a 1.52, which is tied for 4th out of the receivers in this class. That initial burst was very impressive to me. McConkey's a good route runner. This is going to be a guy, I don't want to say stereotypical slot receiver because he also has capabilities outside of that. But if you stuck this guy in the slot, I think you're going to be very happy with the results. His RAS score is an 8.88, which is still very good. And I think that's really only brought down by his height and weight.
Yeah, and you set the tone with your take last week that J.J. McCarthy is actually your favorite prospect, and he had a pretty good event, at least at the Combine, that raised some eyebrows.
Yeah, had the second hardest throwing speed of any QB at the Combine. Granted, Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels all didn't throw, so do take that into account. But he also ran a 6.82 second three cone, which was 6th. Out of any player, not quarterbacks, out of any player at the Combine. So McCarthy definitely has that athleticism. I still think this is going to be a great pick for whoever takes him. I know that's not necessarily a popular opinion right now. Just give it time. I guarantee if your team drafts J.J. McCarthy in the year and a half after, you'll come to love that pick.
And where do you see him getting drafted in terms of top 15, top 20, first round? What are you thinking in terms of McCarthy right now?
I think he's a top 15 lock, and with how so many of these teams just outside the top 10 need quarterback badly, don't be surprised if a team like the Vikings or the Broncos or the Saints trades up just inside the top 10 to take McCarthy.
Staying in the backfield, Florida State running back Trey Benson, looking more and more like the most complete running back in this class, had himself a pretty good combine as well.
Yeah, this is a guy who is one of the best running backs on tape in this draft class. The top three running backs, it's Trey Benson, it's Braylon Allen, and then if you're a Blake Corum guy, he can be up there too. It's just Corum's lack of size and his injury history makes me a bit hesitant on him, but I think Trey Benson and Braylon Allen are up for the top two in this class, and Benson at 6'2", 216, still ran a 4.39 40, which was third, had a 1.52 10-yard split, which was fourth. This is all among running backs, by the way. 10-foot 2-inch broad jump was not the best, only eighth among the running backs, and the vert was also not insane at 33.5. But still, at his size, those numbers are very impressive, and the RAS reflects that at a 9.78. Again, this RAS does not project how they are as a technician on the football field or their skill at playing their position. It is just purely a measure of their pure athleticism.
And then finally going from the skill positions on offense over into the trenches, a couple big boys had themselves a combine, respectively, Amarius Mims and Joe Alt.
Yeah, we'll start off with Joe Alt, the Notre Dame offensive tackle that, at least for me, is OT1 in this year's class, an elite technician at the position, and is also massive. Alt is 6 foot 8.5 inches, so almost 6'9", and 321 pounds. And then he ran a 4.51 20-yard shuttle. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the shuttle drill, it is one of the most important drills for offensive linemen. It's very indicative of their success in the long term. So that's a good number to put up for him. 7.313 cone, also quite good. 28-inch vert, 9 foot 4-inch broad jump. All these numbers are just staggering for a person as big as he is. And then, of course, the 40 just over 5 seconds at 5.05. And all that results in an RAS of 9.91. And with a player as technically skilled as Alt is, I think he might have cemented himself as a top 7 pick this year.
And I'm learning a lot about these prospects along with you listeners, Micah. With that hard-hitting draft analysis of these prospects, really eye-opening to me, who's a little bit of a casual, admittedly, when it comes to the NFL draft, but super enlightening segment, Micah, and I appreciate the insight. Now over to the defensive side.
Well, hold on 1 second. We still got one more offensive guy to talk about. That's your other offensive tackle, Amarius Mims. And this guy lit it up at the combine. 6'8", 340, ran a 5.07 40 with a 1.78 10-yard split, a 4.33 20-yard shuttle, which was second out of every offensive lineman in this year's class. Hey y'all, editing Micah here. So, about an hour after Samuel and I finished recording on SM episode 2 a couple days ago, it dropped that apparently Amarius Mims did not participate in the 20-yard shuttle at all, and his 4.33 time was a clerical error. The actual time belongs to South Dakota State guard Mason McCormick. Now, Mims is still a very athletic player. His RAS still comes in at a 9.5, but just wanted to go ahead and clear this up in case there was any confusion once the full episode of the pod released. So, thanks guys, and back to your regularly scheduled episode. If you aren't familiar with the 4.47 rule, this states that offensive linemen who run a 4.47 or lower in the 20-yard shuttle have played 84% of snaps over the course of their careers if they get drafted. Coming into this year, only 28 offensive linemen had ever run that or lower. Jason Kelsey is in that club as well. This is a verified statistic which, out of all the combine drills for any position, is the best at projecting long-term success. So, even though Mims is not super experienced, only started 8 games in college, I think that he is definitely worth a first-round pick based on the athletic profile alone, which comes in at a 9.7 RAS.
Super explosive guys up front. My apologies to Mr. Mims and to Mr. Farmer over here for a little bit jumping the gun over there for the offensive guys. Now over to defense. Got to lead it off with my guy, Nate Wiggins, who had a 4.28 40, the fastest by a defensive player His measurables were 6'1", 173 pounds, had a 36-inch vert and a 10-foot 7-inch broad jump with an RAS of 9.42. Michael, what were your thoughts on Nate Wiggins' combine performance?
Yeah, Wiggins is impressive. I think the vert is slightly lower than I would have expected, but everything else, the numbers look great. And then for a guy whose tape is as good as Wiggins, you really aren't concerned too much with a slightly lower than expected testing number in the vert. Then another corner that I was super excited to watch this weekend, Toledo's Quinion Mitchell, who was right there with McCarthy for my favorite prospect in this player's draft, or in this year's draft. Mitchell is 6', 195, ran the second fastest 40 time by a corner at 4.33, had a 38-inch vert, a 10-foot 2-inch broad jump, which was slightly shorter than I expected, but still very good. But then also put up 20 reps on the bench press, which was highest for any corner in this year's class, and led to an RAS of 9.75. Then don't let Toledo scare you. He is a Power 5 athlete, and I think whoever drafts him is going to figure that out really quickly.
Yeah, definitely a guy who's going to be a steal there in the first round for a team looking for a lockdown corner. Another corner with a pretty nice combine came out of Rutgers, and it was Max Melton.
Yeah, this is a guy that a lot of you might not know as much of, is projected kind of around the 4th to the 5th round and has really started rising up boards recently, even going into the combine. Then he really showed why. 4.39 40, 8th out of any corner with a 1.51 10-yard split, which is 9th. Vert at 40.5 inches, which was 4th. Jumped out of the gym in the broad jump as well with an 11-foot 4-inch broad jump, 1st of any corner. 9.65 RAS, is only 5'11", but at 187 pounds, this is a guy that you can feel very comfortable chucking into the slot right away and saying, okay, get after it. He's a willing tackler as well, great in run support, so I think some team is going to get a great slot corner in maybe even the late 3rd round.
A few ACC defenders also with nice combine performances. First up was NC State linebacker Peyton Wilson having himself a nice time in Indy.
Yeah, this is a guy that has major problems with injuries. That's going to drive him down the board a lot. If Peyton Wilson was a perfectly healthy player, he's getting picked in the late 20s. But he's not, and he might fall as far as the 3rd round. He ran a 4.43 40, the fastest of any linebacker, with a 1.54 10-yard split, tied for 1st among linebackers. And the RAS score came in at a 9.81, and the tape is amazing. He flies around the field all over the place, super athletic linebacker, and if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a steal for whoever drafts him.
Staying in the ACC, we know how good Florida State's front seven was this season. A couple of their guys really turning heads at the combine this weekend as well. First up inside was Florida State defensive tackle Braden Fiske.
Yeah, Florida State was lucky that their players were allowed to compete in the combine after it was revealed Jordan Travis would not be competing. But still, it was great to see those FSU players out there. Braden Fiske comes in at 6'4", 292, and everything else. Just the more the numbers popped up for Fiske, the more your eyes widened. Had a 4.78 40, 1st among D tackles, 1.68 10-yard split, 3rd, 33.5-inch vert, 1st, 9-foot 9-inch broad jump, 1st, 4.37 20-yard shuttle, tied 1st, and then the 26 bench reps were down in 7th. But at that light, at that freaky of an athlete at D tackle, you're going to expect the bench to be a bit lower. And the RAS score was still a 9.97. So just an absolute freak. Then FSU keeps churning out these freaks on the D-line this year, as Jared Verse was also great, putting up a 9.53 RAS. His standout performance, though, was the bench press. He put up 31 reps, which was not only 1st, but it was 5 more than the next highest edge rusher in this year's class. Versus 6'4", 254, ran a 4.58 40, which was 4th, and also had a great 3-cone 20-yard shuttle and broad jump, which were all top 5 at his position as well. So highly impressive combine for Verse.
And Verse, definitely a game changer. I'd say that his strip sack of Cade Klubnik really propelled Florida State to that win over Clemson in Death Valley. I'm still having war flashbacks from being on the front row of the hill from that game. Definitely an NFL caliber edge rusher. Another edge that put on a show all season and in the college football playoff was Alabama edge Dallas Turner, and he showed off the wheels as well in Indianapolis.
Yeah, this is one guy that started standing out on tape study for me even last year as I was studying Will Anderson. I was like, hold on, this other Alabama edge rusher is a bit of a freak as well. And then we all know what happened this year with Dallas Turner breaking out. Turner is 6'3", 247. He ran a 4.46 40, which at his size and position is absurd. It was first among edge rushers, and his 1.54 10-yard split was tied for first. He had a 40.5-inch vertical at edge, which is also insane, and was first in this class, and a 10-foot 7-inch broad jump, which was tied for third. RAS comes in at 9.49 just because his weight is only 247. He's a little bit small for that edge rusher position, but he doesn't play like it out there.
Yeah, definitely a great day in the combine and a great season for Dallas Turner. We've been praising a lot of these prospects, but one guy had a particularly rough day, and that was Mizzou cornerback Ennis Rakestraw Jr.
Yeah, this is a guy that a lot of people love as a physical press man corner coming into this draft, even though he's only 5'11", 183. And that's something that's been a bit odd to me. I still think there's a world where he's successful, but I'm not sure if his play style will translate. He is not fast. He ran a 4.5 140 with a 1.54 10-yard split, and then you're expecting his broad jump to be pretty good still, but at only 10 feet, it was tied for 22nd. The RAS is only a 4.79, so if he's going to succeed, it's going to be down to his instincts and technique, and with the style of press man that he plays, I'm just not sure if that's viable in the long run, because if you get beat off that initial press, he just does not have the athleticism to recover. So I think that this day could have really hurt Ennis Rakestraw's stock.
A lot of analysis here in this segment, once again from Micah Farmer, and stay tuned for more NFL draft evaluations and coverage as we get ever so close to the April draft. Coming up here pretty soon. We're going to have a lot of NFL draft content as we get a little bit closer there. Also, a pretty good week in college baseball, especially over the weekend. I'll lead off by giving a shout to my school, Clemson, with a pair of 5-4 victories over the University of South Carolina. The Friday night game, unfortunately, getting rained out, but Saturday, Andrew Chufa with a walk-off solo homer to kind of erase the comeback attempt by South Carolina, who had tied it in the bottom of the eighth. Chufo in extra innings, able to give the Tigers the victory on Saturday. And then on Sunday afternoon, Aiden Canuck threw 5 solid innings. Will Taylor with a solo home run, Nolan Araki with a home run, and Blake Wright with a home run in the eighth. The Tigers sweeping their rivals for now. We'll see if Game 3 gets played later on down the season over at Founders Park.
Yeah, a good series for the Tigers for sure. As far as my Tigers, over on the plains of Alabama, down at Auburn, some pretty good baseball being played down there as well, as they succeeded in knocking a few wins down over UConn. This Auburn lineup is still really good. It's just, can this pitching stay consistent? The signs so far have been encouraging, but we'll have to see how that plays out over the course of the season. But the story of the year so far in college baseball is Georgia Tech's Drew Burress. The freshman leads the NCAA right now in home runs at over 10 already at this point in the season. So shout out to Drew Burress for sure. Then one last bit of baseball news for you back into the MLB. Matt Chapman has signed with the San Francisco Giants on a 3-year deal. Another short deal for a Scott Boras client. What do you think? Do you think the Giants won this, or do you think Chapman won this?
I think Chapman won this just because I think he's kind of on the decline of his career. And if I may, I think San Francisco is one of those teams that just has 78-ish wins written all over them.
I like this San Francisco lineup a little bit. You look at the signing of Young Ho Lee, then the tower of power that is Jorge Soler in the 4 spot. Matt Chapman, you plug in somewhere in the 5 or the 6. You're going to strike out about 87 bazillion times, but you're going to hit some home runs. So I think this Giants team could be some fun this year, but yeah, definitely not the ceiling they had a couple years ago, giving the Dodgers a run for their money.
And a gauntlet of a division in the NL West there, with obviously the Dodgers, who are loaded this season, but also the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are coming off of a World Series appearance. So that's going to be a bit of a struggle for San Francisco, but super excited to see how that NL West race shakes out.
I'm just happy you didn't hype up the Padres. I'm so sick of people doing that.
Yeah, they're the most overrated team consistently in Major League Baseball.
Okay,
in my
ESPN.
opinion.
ESPN, quit trying to make Dodgers Padres a rivalry. It's not a rivalry. Giants Dodgers is one of the most storied rivalries in the history of the
Absolutely.
sport. Quit plugging the Padres because you like Fernando Tatis so much and realize the Giants Dodgers is 10 times the rivalry, even more, 100 times the rivalry that Padres-Dodgers will ever be. Dodgers fans, what little committed ones there actually are, look at the Padres like we look at ants. They're not important. Occasionally they're annoying. They really don't matter. Stop trying to make that a rivalry. But on that little rant note, that is it for this episode of SM Sports Radio, and we will see you next week.